From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressey.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm Eric Cressey, and this is episode 47. I'm excited for today's guest because he's one of our longest tenured Cressey sports performance athletes. He's been working with us at the facility for 13 years and has some great stories to tell about being not just one of the youngest players in Major League Baseball at one point in his career, but also one of the shortest and persevering through some pretty crazy injury experiences. So I think you're in for a real treat with the lessons he has to share with us today. Today's episode is brought to you by Mark Pro. If you're a baseball pitcher, you know that keeping your arm healthy is essential. But with high training volumes on top of games, that's not always easy. Overuse is a significant problem for players at every level of baseball right now. Certainly, we see shoulder and elbow injuries as some of the most common overuse injuries in baseball. And as an example, at the professional level, a UCL injury can result in an average of 17.2 months out of competition. That's a huge deal also if you're a young player and you miss out on a lot of development. So really, at the end of the day, there are three ways that we can combat overuse. First, you can reduce the workload, and certainly there's been a lot of research out there on pitch counts. Second, and this is the theme of these podcasts, is that you can build a significant level of strength and fitness to prepare yourself. However, a third key approach that's often overlooked is that you can work to improve your recovery so that you can safely display your fitness day in and day out. And that's really where the Mark Pro is an effective tool. Some athletes will even use it to warm up their arms before they throw as well. Mark Pro is a cutting-edge EMS device that uses patented technology to create non-fatiguing muscle activation, and this is what separates it from other recovery tools. Muscle activation with Mark Pro facilitates each stage of the body's natural recovery process, similar to active recovery, but without the extra muscular effort and fatigue. Athletes can use it for as long as they need to ensure a more full and quick recovery in between training or games. With its portability and ease of use, players can use Mark Pro while traveling between games or while relaxing at home. We have players that use it all the time on team flights to bounce back while they're just chilling on that flight. We have plenty of pro guys that use this. In fact, every ML team and over 200 pro pitchers are regularly using Mark Pro. Put it to the test for yourself now with their new Try Before You Buy program, and you can use the promo code Cressey at checkout for 10% off at markpro.com. Again, that's Cressey, Cressey, at checkout for 10% off at markpro.com, markpro.com. Today's guest played high school baseball in Massachusetts, but was overlooked by college coaches and professional scouts because of his size. Luckily, the stars aligned perfectly, and he was discovered while pitching in an American Legion game and signed as an undrafted free agent by the Toronto Blue Jays in the summer of 2007, even though he had no offers to play Division I baseball. Between 2008 and 2010, he put up some impressive numbers out of the bullpen across several levels for the Blue Jays, and was traded to the Braves and onto the Royals during the 2010 season. He made his MLB debut for the Royals on opening day of 2011. 3 days later, he earned his first MLB victory by pitching 3 scoreless innings against the Angels in extra innings, striking out 5. 2012 proved to be a breakout year for him as he struck out 93 batters in 69 innings for a Royals single-season strikeout record for a left-handed reliever. He ranked second in MLB in strikeouts by a left-handed reliever behind only Aroldis Chapman. The following year, he was selected to Team USA's World Baseball Classic roster. In 2014, he pitched in the World Series, and in 2015 was part of the Royals World Championship team. Since then, he's played with the Washington Nationals and Chicago Cubs, and is now in spring training with the Colorado Rockies. At the time of this podcast, he has a 3.60 ERA over 275 MLB appearances. Please welcome to the show, Tim Collins. Tim, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it. Glad to be on.
This seems weird because I feel like I've known you so long that it's kind of random just to welcome you as if we've never talked.
I know we're going on like year 20.
2007, so we're 13 years deep.
I've
actually known you almost as long as I've known my wife. So
that's pretty funny.
You're in elite company.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually a good place to kind of start it. So, I feel like your story got told a ton back around your rookie year and in the years that followed, especially, being 5'7", obviously it stands out. Not for actual height reasons, but for the profound nature of how hard it is to make it to the big leagues at that height. Now that you're an established veteran, we don't hear it as much. But let's talk about the story about how you wind up playing professional baseball, because you did not have a single Division I offer out of high school, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I was set to go to Community College of Rhode Island, and even that was kind of like, I guess you could say it was right place, right time, and having some people know other people. And it kind of went from there. It asked me if I wanted to play college baseball. I said, yeah, sure. And I just took the entrance exam, and fortunately I was again in the right place at the right time, and didn't have to go to college.
Well, I think you were interesting too, because people forget your high school numbers were staggering. Like,
Yeah.
what was your team's record in your 4 years of high school?
I think we won like 90 plus games. And again, we played 20 game seasons. So,
Yep.
4 years, that's 80 games. And then you add playoffs. I think we won like 90 or 91 games, 91-5 or something like that.
That's amazing. And you were a two-way guy. You were an outfielder and you were a pitcher.
Yeah, I convinced my high school coach my senior year to let me play first base. At my tall stature at first base, I convinced him that I could jump and I could pick it, and if guys make bad throws, that's their fault.
All right, so you joke about stature. Give our listeners a feel for how tall or how big Tim was, height and weight, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year.
Oh gosh, my freshman year I entered at 4'7", 82 pounds, and I remember when we were in gym, the girls were kind of like, "Oh my God, I'm bigger than you." And I'm like, "Okay, that's cool." And then sophomore year, I kind of grew a little bit as far as height goes. It was a huge growth spurt for me, I think, but I was like 5'2", I believe. I think that's what it said on my license, 5'2".
7 inches in a year, we'll take it.
Yeah, and that was about 95 pounds, give or take a few pounds. Junior year, I was probably same height, maybe a little bit taller, about 100 to 105 pounds. And then senior year is kind of when I plateaued. I was about 115, 120 pounds, 5'5", I think.
Savage.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we're talking about senior year, and that was a whopping 2 months before you wound up becoming a professional baseball player. So
Yeah.
let's talk about how that transpired.
So, I was pitching in Legion Ball, and, J.P. Ricciardi, the former GM for the Blue Jays, happened to be there to watch another guy who happened to be on the other end of the spectrum of height. He was a 6'7" lefty, Keith Landers, and he ended up not pitching. I was supposed to pitch against him, and I pitched really well. And so, obviously liked what he saw, and I think that was on a Tuesday. On a Friday, I threw a bullpen for a cross checker, and Monday, I think I was heading down to Dunedin, Florida for a rookie ball.
As I recall, looking back, wasn't it like 12 up, 12 down, like 12 punch outs?
Yeah.
I think that was the story. But I think
I was being modest.
Yeah, I fair enough. But I think, how are you punching guys out? Like, what was it that made you stand out? Because it wasn't at that point elite velocity, was it?
Yeah, no, I didn't throw hard at all. I was 83, 84. And I never really heard what my velocities were. But I was, at times I was 82 to 84, and I had a really good curveball. And, I threw a lot of strikes. And I was pretty deceptive, because even at that size, 82, 83 shouldn't come out of a kid that small. And I think a lot had to do with the talent level, I guess, in that area. Worcester, Massachusetts isn't pumping out, elite baseball players left and right. But, I think that was, I was very deceptive. I had a really good curveball, and not many people know this, but I had a really good knuckleball as well. So
I did know that, in fact.
Yeah.
but I think it's even more deceiving because the leg kick was huge, right? Your
right. Yeah.
Your foot was above your head.
Yeah. That kind of just developed over time. It was kind of subconscious, I guess. just trying to get the most out of my body, as you would expect, being such a small guy. I was trying to generate as much power as I could, and that's kind of what felt comfortable to me to get everything going from a stop position to getting down the mound.
And to be clear, you never had a pitching coach growing up, correct?
Yeah, no, my high school coach, he kind of pointed me in the right direction, but, as far as mechanics go and, learning how to throw and, learning how to throw effectively with, using my body as much as I can, that was kind of just self-taught.
Absolutely. So I'll clue folks in. So when I actually first was introduced to you by, who was the guy who was supposed to be your roommate at the community college of Rhode Island.
Corey.
Corey McDonald, great guy. So when I reached out to you, I remember the first day you came in, you were a whopping 5'5", 130 pounds. And I think you had 6 career innings under your belt in the GCL.
Yep.
So that first off season was kind of eye opening. Like you filled out and started to figure some stuff out. Let's talk about, so you signed in 2007
Mm-hmm.
and you were on a big league opening day roster in 2011.
Yep.
At age 21, you probably should have gone to the big leagues that previous September in a different organization. So what takes a 5'5", 130 pound guy into a big leaguer in 2 years?
I think just a lot of dedication to the training. I think the biggest thing for me was, maturing, and a good nutrition and a good strength training program is really what helped me turn a corner as far as developing into the pitcher that I became. I certainly needed the velocity. I needed the weight. I needed the strength that came along with that. So really it was just kind of focusing on the meat and potatoes and just building a good foundation and putting on good weight and getting strong.
Where I think you were really interesting was your weight gain and your velocity gain were very linear, like they were directly related to one another. Talk about how it changed over the years, because 07, like you said, you were signed at 83, 84. How did it climb in the years that followed? And also, like, speak to kind of, it's not easy to get out of extended as an undrafted free agent sign,
right?
And climb multiple levels in the same year.
Yeah. So, like you said, I was 83, 84. In 2008, that would have been my first spring training. And that's when I really kind of opened the eyes of some of the staff around that organization, that it really wasn't kind of a joke. They see this little kid walking in who doesn't have a piece of hair on his body, just a tiny kid. And I think that was the first time that I sort of opened some eyes that, I really had some potential. And I'm not quite, you would probably know better how much weight I put on that off season. But that really, like you said, it really transferred to my velocity.
It was about 25 pounds. I think you were 155.
Right. So I was, at that spring training, I was 88 to 90, touching 91. And at that point, I should have probably broke camp with a full season team. But I was sent to extended. And I think I spent probably a week and a half there. And by chance, they invited me to go to Lansing to pitch against, I believe it was Michigan State, in this kind of exhibition game. And I went in and I pitched 2 innings. I struck out 5, and they were like, "Who the heck is this little kid?" And the college coaches were like, "How did we miss him?" So they sent me back to extended for a few days, and sure enough, I got a call one morning and said, "Hey, you're going to go to Lansing." And I remember because my roommates were so mad because they were 24, 25, and I was 18 years old and very limited innings, and I was jumping over them. So the following year, so I spent a full year in Lansing.
You're being like very modest right now. You were Baseball America's low A reliever of the year, and you struck out 98 guys in 68 innings.
I think it might have even been less, like 58 innings or something like that.
Yeah, it was a 1.5 ERA. It was an excellent season.
I had a really, really good year. I was eventually closing games for them, and Like you said, I had a lot of strikeouts, and that was kind of my MO in high school is low innings, high strikeouts, and so I think what helped me carry that on was the strength that I gained and the weight that I put on. So, but yeah, my velocity there was 89, 91, and then the following year in high A, I think I was probably up to 93, 94 that year. So I saw another jump in the velocity, and I think I even put on, probably 6 or 7 more pounds, but it looked like 20. And yeah, I saw, a good jump in velocity with the weight gain and the strength gain. So I spent, almost the whole year there. And then I had the opportunity to go up to Double A, and I got hit around a little bit, as some people do with the adjustments. But where are we at now? Double A, 2010 is probably, I would say, my best year that I had in the minor leagues. I think halfway through the season before I got traded, I was at like 42 innings with like 78 strikeouts or something like that. So I was striking out a lot of guys, and my velo again had jumped a little bit, touching 95, 96. And then that's kind of where I bounced around a little bit.
And you had gotten really, I know that was the point in your career where the Jays introduced you to, kind of a lot of Alan Jaeger's work with long toss, and that was something for you that was pretty game changing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was huge into the whole long toss thing, and I still am. I sort of got away from it a little bit, but I'm kind of back on that same routine. But yeah, the long toss was a huge part of not just gaining some arm strength, but keeping my arm healthy throughout the season. And I think that was played a huge role in really everything, my health, my, being able to pitch every day, feeling good every day. My velocity was up a little bit. I even had, pitching coaches hitting fungos out to me because nobody else wanted to play catch with me. So it was kind of, it got a little bit hard to long toss on a daily basis, but I made sure it happened. But yeah, so that was huge for me.
2010 though, I remember, I want to say they traded you right on the All-Star break. I remember the day you called me. I was driving to Maine, and I got the phone call, and you were headed to Atlanta. So give me the timeline on it.
Oh man. So I woke up to about like 20 missed calls, from the Blue Jays, assistant GM. And so I call him back, and he's like, "Hey, you've been traded." I'm like, okay. And I was at home on the All-Star break. And so, I had to drive back up to New Hampshire, which wasn't a very far drive, obviously. And that was it, man. I packed my bags and got on a flight and went to, Jackson, Mississippi, and spent, a wonderful 17 days there.
You didn't even get up. Didn't you just sleep on a couch the whole time? I don't think you even got an apartment.
I slept on a couch in a house with like 4 or 5 different guys. Obviously, a longtime client of yours, Tim Gustafson, was where I met him. He became one of my good friends.
Yeah,
and,
he's a legend.
Yeah. So, yeah, I spent 17 days with them, and then I remember the trade deadline was like 2 minutes away. And the only reason I knew that is because there was another guy on the team who was, really, really praying he was getting traded. He wanted out of there so bad. But I got a call. We had just gotten in from batting practice, and I just happened to pick up my phone. And it was the Braves assistant GM. And he said, "Hey, I've got good news." And I'm like, okay, when you hear that, you don't think you get traded. You think, you're either getting sent up to AAA or, something good. He said, "Hey, I've got good news. We traded you." I'm like, okay.
And to be fair, just to put this in context for people, this is 6 appearances, 8 innings, 14 strikeouts, 1 run allowed.
Yeah. So I was pitching good. So I said, okay. So he said, Dayton Moore's going to call you. Just be near your phone. So I was. And so, of course, Dayton calls me and introduces himself and, just expresses that he's, excited to have me in the organization. And I'm 19, and he says, "Do you think you can get AAA hitters out?" And of course, I say, "Yeah, absolutely." He said, "Okay, we'll make it happen." So that was it. I mean, I packed my bags again, and well, actually, I didn't pack my bags. I flew back to Jackson, Mississippi from Alabama. Took Tim Gustafson's car to go get my stuff at the field, and then took a taxi to the airport and flew to Memphis, Tennessee, is where I met the AAA team of Omaha, and finished the season there.
There you go. All right. So I think there's like a really important lesson here for a lot of the players listening. Like, would you agree with me that some people in this game just have no grasp of how hard it is to get to the big leagues? Like how unbelievably good you have to be to just advance level after level?
Yeah. I think, guys who are obviously in the midst of it have the understanding of what it takes, and, well, not really what it takes, but, what you have to go through in order to get to that level.
Mm-hmm.
I think the people outside looking in have zero understanding of what it really takes to get to that level and everything that you have to go through. And,
mm-hmm.
It's not just on the field stuff, it's off the field stuff,
Yep.
your living situation, your nutrition, your strength training, everything that goes along with what it takes to be successful. I think people often miss what goes on behind the scenes. Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to read the numbers off. In 2008, 68 innings, 98 punch outs. In 2009, over 2 levels, 77 innings, 116 punch outs. In 2010, it was 71 innings, 108 punch outs over AA and AAA. So like you literally had to go out and put up 1.5 strikeouts an inning for year after year after year to make that every year jump, and in some cases jump 2 levels. So
right.
I think a lot of people think it's a lot easier than it actually is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it definitely wasn't easy. I think the one thing that I kind of carried with me over the years through the minor leagues was, I really had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I was there on a chance,
Yeah.
and if it weren't for that chance, I would probably be working construction or going to college and hopefully continuing my baseball career. But I never looked at it as if I walked into the field and got released, I wouldn't be surprised. But to me, that didn't matter. As long as I still got to go to the field every day and had the opportunity to pitch, I can at least showcase, what I can do. So I just kind of, didn't worry about the type of stuff that other guys, would worry about, walking into the clubhouse at 6 a.m. and they're kind of hiding in the bushes to get to their locker so they didn't get released. But
do you think part of it too was like just the nature of like what Kansas City was at that time? So you made your major league debut on opening day in 2011, and I mean Hosmer, Moustakas, Adcock, Aaron Crow, you. I want to say there were a couple other rookies on that roster as well.
Oh gosh, probably half the team was rookies. Yeah.
So I'm curious. First year in the big leagues, you had some successes, you had some struggles. What made you a big leaguer in your eyes, and then also what did you have to change to stick? Because it's just as hard to stay there as it is to get there.
Yeah. I think just like you rattled off my numbers. I think putting up really eye-popping numbers is what it takes to get there. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that have to happen for you, and a lot of other things that you just have to, just do. The nutrition, like I keep saying, the nutrition, the strength training, a lot of that stuff. If you just keep working at it, it pays dividends. For me, I don't feel like I was in the right place at the right time, but the right organization kind of got me there as well.
Mm-hmm.
They were they were in a rebuilding phase. And that kind of gave me the opportunity to land that spot. I mean, obviously I had to pitch well, but they really didn't have anything to lose with, putting a non-roster guy on the roster and being 21 years old. I wouldn't say it was an easy decision for them, but there wasn't anything holding myself back from making that team. Yeah, I just, to stick, it's being consistent. Once you get, I've always said it's easier to make it than it is to stay. Once you get there, you're not done. I mean, you've got to continue doing the same thing and refining and adjusting almost, on a daily basis, because, it's ever changing, and you have to adapt to that for sure.
And you came up and you were a four seam and curveball guy before it was cool to be one of those guys.
Right.
You figured it out, 7 or 8 years before baseball did. But
Yeah.
the changeup was really, I know you've said in the past, what helped you to stick in Major League Baseball. And that was not something you had a lot of success with in the minor leagues, correct?
I think I threw probably 3 changeups my entire minor league career, and there were 3 home runs. And I didn't give up many home runs in the minor leagues. So it was something that I worked on for years. And I really, really worked hard on it. Probably 2010 is when I really started to develop a feel for the pitch. I wouldn't say it was a good pitch at that point, but it was definitely getting better.
What was it that was so hard for you to learn about it? Was it that you couldn't find any of smaller hands? Like, was it the challenge of not having the right hand position?
I just couldn't figure out how to slow the ball down. I couldn't find the right grip that was comfortable to command. I couldn't find the right grip that allowed me to take the amount of velocity off that I needed. And it was incredibly tough to figure out both of those, because not having a comfortable grip, and then you think you might have found one, but you go to throw it and it's only 5 or 6 miles an hour off your fastball. And for me, that wasn't enough. I was getting hit around with that. So it took a while to just find a grip. And then it took a while to refine that and learn how to command it and how to utilize it, what counts to throw it in, who to throw it to. I mean, so there's a long list of things that I needed to work on before I thought it was a good pitch for me.
And when did it finally start to click? Was it in Double A, or was it actually once you got to the big leagues?
Well, I think once I got to the big leagues, is kind of when it clicked. I mean, my first year in the big leagues, I had a lot of struggles. My biggest issue was my command. Obviously at that level, everybody is elite, or near that, and you get exposed very quickly. And I think that was probably my biggest lesson that I learned that year is I just can't be that guy that goes in there and outstuffs everybody. And I really think the changeup was that was probably the year that I really figured it out. I learned how to command it. I found a grip that was comfortable for me, and it was just a matter of trying to figure out how to utilize that, with my pitch sequence.
Absolutely. So 2011, 67 innings, 48 walks. 2012, 69 innings, 34 walks, but with 93 strikeouts. So 2012 was a big breakout year. Obviously, we talked about the changeup being something that was really impactful for you, but I'm curious, you also played around with the delivery that year. So coming up, it was extremely athletic, huge leg kick like we talked about. But it led to some command issues. And it was Dave Island was your pitching coach at the time, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
And what were the big changes that you made, between 11 and 12 on the delivery side of things that you felt like, led to some great numbers? Obviously, it got you a Team USA invite for 2013 in the World Baseball Classic. What were the mechanical modifications, and how did you reconcile that with not, kind of having the different coached out of you? Because it's not easy to just, tone down a guy who's 5'7" with a huge leg kick, right?
Right. Well, we just really simplified it. And when I say that, I mean, we kind of took what I did best and just found something that I could repeat and be consistent with. I think for me, when I think about it, I got to a point where I just couldn't consistently repeat what I was doing. I think a lot of that had to do with the volume of throwing that I was doing. In the minor leagues, everything is very monitored as far as your usage goes. Very rarely do you go back to back, and if you do, you get 2 days rest. And then 2011 comes, and I'm kind of thrown into the fire. 2, 3, 4 days in a row, multiple innings, you name it. So I was having a lot of trouble just finding something that I could consistently repeat. And so that was kind of my main goal going into 2012, was trying to figure out something that allowed me to use everything that I have and just sort of simplify it. And so some of the things that we did were we kind of limited the leg kick. We messed around with some hand positioning from the set. But even when we were messing with all of that, I still kind of stuck to what I felt comfortable with, and how I thought, or what I needed to do to generate as much power as I could.
I like it. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about pitch selection. So as we mentioned, you were throwing, big time breaking balls and four seamers before, most people had caught on to that. And I'm interested, do you feel like your ability to spin the ball is something you were born with? Was it something that you developed over time, just playing catch when you were a kid? Was it something that surged once you get to pro ball? Like what made for your curveball? And just for context, in 2018, your curveball ranked 5th in all of Major League Baseball in vertical movement, 7th in vertical movement versus the average, and 10th in percentage drop versus average. So by every measure possible, it was a top 10 curveball in baseball. What's the secret for you? How did you learn it, and how do you keep refining it?
Well, there's always one thing that stuck with me. And it's kind of funny that it does, because I was playing for a 9-10-year-old travel team, and I threw a curveball to the coach. And this is funny, but I'm 9 or 10 years old. I threw a curveball, and he looked at me, he goes, "That wasn't very good." And I'm like, "Oh crap." I thought I had something. And that really kind of stuck with me. And I don't know if I, subconsciously carried that around, but from that point on, I really wanted that to be a good pitch. And at some point, I think it clicked. And obviously in high school, I had a really good curveball. But there wasn't a point in between that moment and high school where it just clicked. I think I just kind of developed it, and, just kind of is what it is, I guess.
Are there cues that you have with respect to a curveball that, reminders that you give yourself, or even like analogies you utilize?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest thing is I've got to really make sure that I'm staying tight, bringing the ball close to me. And what I mean by that is, I don't want to get a long arm path with it. And if I'm doing that, I tend to cast it. And so it's hard to explain what I visualize in my mind. And I think that's kind of true for most people when they're explaining their pitches. But my mental cue is always to stay short, and not get too long, bringing the ball back. If that makes any sense.
It makes some sense. And so we're going to kind of change gears a little bit. In 2014, you guys went to the World Series. I believe you threw in Game 6. Season went long as a 7-game series. After the season ended, you had an old hernia repaired. And so tell kind of the story of that off season, because I think it's a good lesson for guys, on how injuries develop.
Yeah. So obviously the World Series took us into November. And so, that made it the longest season that I've ever had, months wise and appearances wise. and I bounced around a little bit from, the big leagues in AAA that year. Yeah, like you said, I had an old hernia that I've had for a long time. And, I thought for some reason that this is the off season that I'm going to get it repaired. So it was like maybe a week and a half after the season ended, I went up to Philadelphia and had it repaired. And I think the recovery, as far as not really being able to do anything, was about 6 weeks. And so that took me to mid-December. And after already having such a short off season, I made it even shorter by not being able to have the proper or enough training to build a foundation to carry me into the following season. And on top of that, I had a sort of a rushed throwing program, I would say. I guess I would kind of describe it best as not ready to take on that amount of throwing, just strictly due to the lack of training that I was able to get in. And so I guess it was sort of too much too soon. And then when you get to spring training, I mean, you've got to be ready. They're just going to throw the ball at you, and you've got to go out there and you got to take the ball and go.
Right on. So elbow went in your first outing of the spring. And I think that's something there was a lot of talk about that in the past, of like kind of the first 2 weeks of spring training being the Tommy John epidemic. And I think you see a lot of pitchers that, you certainly see it in guys who have to rush to get ready, but I think also we see it in guys who are really aggressive with weighted balls, and they acquire their external rotation too fast. And, that's kind of a perfect example. So, I think there's a good lesson there, is that, an off-season throwing program can't start in January. It's gotta have a little bit of build up beforehand. Otherwise you're playing from behind the eight ball a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think that's the unfortunate part of the story, is that's kind of just the initial, part of it. So talk about your Tommy John recovery and, kind of where that went.
So, yeah, like you said, it was first game of spring training. And I think it was probably like a week later. I had flown out to see Dr. Andrews, and basically to get my second opinion. And that morning I was prepped for surgery and had my elbow done. And so I rehabbed for the 12 months, and I was throwing live BPs, and it was, I thought, was a pretty good rehab. There were some times where I would guess you would consider them hiccups through my throwing program, where I felt sort of not natural. But from everybody that I talk to, it's kind of the natural progression. You're going to have those sort of feelings and those kind of hiccups. And, I was kind of just told, see how you feel tomorrow, see how your next throwing session goes. And, it just happened to go well, and I would progress, and I would get to that same point and kind of feel those things again. And the throwing would go well, then I'd progress. So I got to my live BPs, and I got to a point where I really just couldn't do my everyday stuff, turning doorknobs and picking up my kids. And I was really doing zero baseball activity in between my live BPs. I would shut it down, and then hopefully it would be okay for my next one. But it just got too much to handle everyday stuff. And so that's, I wanted to have an MRI just for a peace of mind. And, the rest of the story. Torn again.
Yeah. Or either it tore again, or it never was there held in the first place.
Right. Yeah. So it was never that was something that was never really answered for me. That was sort of my own opinion, that it just never really took. Because there was never one moment where I felt a pop again. So I sort of chalked it up to, I was rehabbing something that was inevitably, going to tear again.
And, I always remember a conversation we had when, I want to say it was around the 11 and a half month mark when you were having a lot of discomfort, and, you had been around like Luke Hochevar and Chris Medlin, like guys who had been through it. And,
Right.
The feedback you had been was that, hey, there's going to be stiffness, there's going to be soreness, you're going to have to push through it. And I think sometimes like you're a tough dude, right? You don't get to the big leagues at 5'7", 165 pounds by being soft. And I think sometimes we see people who are almost too tough for their own good. They think that, significant pain and a loss of function is a normal part of it. When in reality, anybody else probably would have tapped out and asked sooner than that. So it's an interesting lesson in that sometimes like pain is definitely not normal.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think I kind of was really relying on the opinions of other guys and what they went through. And what I've realized now is that not everybody's the same. Guys are going to have different things go on during their rehab process that other guys don't. Some guys are going to feel a certain way that other guys don't. But I think the biggest thing that I missed was the loss of function. My range of motion was not good. I was really battling to get that back in between throwing sessions. And so I was sort of not listening to my body at that point. I was just kind of relying on what other people were telling me.
Now let's compare the revision, so the second one, to the initial Tommy John. So obviously you missed, all of 15, and all of 16. So as you're rehabbing in 16 on the revision, how was the experience different than the first one? Was it night and day in terms of how you felt?
I think there were certain points during the first one that I feel like I felt better than I did in the second one. The second one was very, very, very slow, and rightfully so. I mean, you have a failed surgery very recently, and the biggest thing is being cautious.
Yep.
So to me, the biggest difference the second time around was a lot of the things that were implemented at certain points during the first one, they were pushed back in the second one. So we were very cautious in how things progressed.
And right, that's the way to do it. And so timeline, you had the revision, in 2015. What was the date on it? Oh, excuse me, 2016. It was spring.
2000,
It was spring of 16.
I think that was, gosh, I tore it almost a year to the date, as my first one. And then they didn't want me, running out on the field with a cast on my arm for our World Series ring. So they waited till after the ceremony. So for a month I had a blown elbow. And I was just playing catch with guys and doing my normal stuff. And so I think that was April 12th or April 13th of 2016 was the second one.
And, so you, we got to spend a lot of time together, and you moved back to Massachusetts for that year. And, so 2017, you come back, you signed with the Nationals, started off in the GCL, worked up to high A, and then got to double A that year. And, you had 18 appearances in affiliated ball. What was the elbow? How was it like that year? Cause you were little, you were 13 or 14 months, I want to say, when you went back.
Probably a little bit more. Let me think.
Maybe
it was probably
longer.
about 14 and a half to 15 months before I was back in an actual game. Yeah.
And how did the elbow respond? I guess that's the bigger question.
At that point, I think my mind was further along than my body was. And I didn't realize that until after the season. 'Cause there were a lot of times during that period I felt like I was being held back. And so there were a lot of frustrations with that alone. I thought I felt pretty good. I thought the ball was coming out pretty good. Not till I got to double A that I realized it's not coming out very good.
Yeah.
I think that the numbers will tell I got whacked around pretty good. But it was really more of a mental battle than a physical battle. My arm felt good. I just didn't have that life that I was expecting. I didn't have the crispness that my fastball usually had. I didn't have the consistency with my break on my curveball. And I think I was really struggling physically, but I didn't realize it because mentally I was so ready for the next level because I wanted to get to that light at the end of the tunnel and obviously make it back to the big leagues. But the front office was very blunt with me that my stuff wasn't very good at that point, and it didn't hit me until after the season that they were right, and I was very thankful that they were honest with me and held me back to develop and continue to progress instead of pushing me forward and trying to force that ultimate goal.
And I think you were able to get back to a lot of the roots in that 17 to 18 off season in terms of being a little more aggressive with your throwing frame once you trusted it. I know you did a lot of work with Mark Campbell, the director of mental conditioning for the Nationals. Talk a little bit about that. What were the biggest changes you made on that front?
So first off, Mark Campbell, I love him. He's fantastic. He's one of my best friends now.
What I would say is this is an important qualification. Tim Collins, I met in 2017, would have rolled his eyes at the concept of mental conditioning. Would you agree?
Yeah. I probably would have sat down and had a conversation, but I was sort of jaded to that side of baseball just from past experiences.
Yeah.
But what I really loved about working with Mark was it wasn't ever about baseball.
Yeah.
It was life stuff. How to mentally prepare yourself, not just for baseball, but for life after baseball. And a lot of the stuff that we did had nothing to do with it, had nothing to do with baseball. We would sit and just talk like friends would for hours. So that kind of built my trust with knowing that he wasn't trying to change who I was. He was trying to help me become the best possible me in any scenario.
And I distinctly remember we were at the game in 2018. I think it was your first big league spring training appearance for the Nationals in 18. We saw 97 on the radar gun, and sure enough, 30 appearances in Syracuse, and you were back in the big leagues in the Nationals for 38 appearances that year.
Yeah.
Did the arm really turn a corner in 18, that second year, in terms of how it bounced back between starts and things like that?
It did, yeah. The biggest thing for me, what I kind of gathered going into the offseason 17 was I just had been rehabbing for almost 3 years. And to think that I was going to be at my best at that point was really just kind of far-fetched. I had put in so much work and effort and time to get to that point. I was just completely exhausted. And so for me, the biggest benefit was having a full off season to get back to my regular routine, to train, to have a normal throwing program, to be able to get my nutrition back on track. And that is where I really saw my arm turn a corner. Spring training, I was, there was some normal soreness, but really, I was really prepared for that. I was prepared to make the team and be able to take on the everyday workload that you're called upon to do in the big leagues. So I felt like I was really prepared at that point. That's kind of what helped me turn a corner was, just being able to have 5 months to not do, specific baseball activity. I think that really helped.
What would you say the biggest lessons that you've learned, just in terms of how you manage your arms since you were called up in 11 are? Is it how you save your bullets? Is it how you throw between outings? Is it the manual therapy you asked for? How you structure your training? What is it that if you could go back to 2011 and teach yourself that lesson back then, what would it be?
I think it would be, the biggest thing I learned from my rehab was in order to progress, you have to listen to your body. And what I mean by that is the days I felt great, I did what I needed to. I didn't try to go above and beyond. I wanted to feel good the next day. And I think that's the best way to progress is what do I got to do to feel good the next day so that I can feel good the next day and the next day. If I could go back to 2011, I would probably, I don't know if I would change much. I would probably maybe clean up my nutrition a little bit during the season. I would probably, I got away from long tossing, somewhere between, 12 and 13 and 14 a little bit. I've got away from long tossing. I think that's probably something I would have wished I continued doing. I think that probably would have put me in a better position to take on that workload that I had from 11 to 14, and might have put me in a better position going into that next year. But
that's an easy mistake to make, though.
Yeah.
In your defense, I remember, when you're getting used like that much at the big league level. I remember I asked you, like, "Hey Tim, when was the last time you threw 300 feet?" And your response was something like, "I do it every day. They just catch it at 60 feet 6 inches."
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest part is to find a partner that's willing to go along with you every day. And one day turns into two, and then you don't do it for a third day, and then you don't do it for the fourth day, and then next thing you know, your limit is 90 feet. And for me, that's not how my body likes to operate. I've got to see that carry, and other people will go against that, but for me, that's where I benefit the most is seeing that carry and seeing that ball travel 300 feet.
I love it. All right. So at the end, we always do a lightning round. This is the fun one. All right. So back in your minor league era, you were notorious around this Cressey Sports Performance facility for being an amazing Girl Scout cookie salesman.
Yes.
What was the exact number you sold in a day for one of our clients?
I don't know. I probably sold like 90 boxes or something like that.
You built a table just to set up in the office, right?
Yeah, out of scrap wood.
If you had to estimate how many hours I was going to say, what's the number one strategy for selling Girl Scout cookies? What is it? What made you so charismatic?
You got to relate to the people, and you just don't take no for an answer. I mean, nobody's gonna say no to cookies, especially in a gym. I mean, you just can't take no for an answer. Everybody has their credit card. I mean, they're gonna pay Pete at the desk, so they're gonna pay me too.
All right. So next question is, you also are notorious for probably spending more hours at CSP than actual staff members.
Sure.
What do you think your average hourly work week was at CSP?
Oh gosh, I probably put in about 70 to 80 hours a week.
Yeah. And it was probably even double that when you figured you lived with Pete one off season too.
Yeah, I
so
did.
You were at home on the clock too.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So this is what I ask of a lot of guys. What's more important, stuff or command?
In my opinion, I think a little bit of both. You have to have the stuff, to be able to compete at that level. But if you have stuff, but you don't have command, your stuff isn't as good. So I think they kind of go hand in hand, in my opinion.
That's a little bit of a vanilla answer, but we're going to let you get away with it. Most guys have picked a side. All right. So what advice would you give to a teenage Tim Collins?
Eat some food, and train heavy. That would be the advice I'd give myself. I think, obviously I would tell myself, just to keep pushing along, because the ultimate goal is going to be there. So.
Nice. All right. Favorite teammate of all time and why?
Oh gosh.
You can pick a couple if you want to.
Man. All right. So Tristan Magnuson is the first one that pops into my mind. He's my roommate.
Great guy.
Yeah. One of my best friends. Had a lot of good, brother arguments and a lot of good brother times.
you guys were the odd couple too. He's 6'8", you're 5'7".
Yeah, so we complimented each other really well. I think my next one was probably Jonathan Broxton.
Nice.
He was again, he was kind of like a brother to me. He was like a big bear, and it was. If I jumped on his back, he would kind of lightly pick up my shirt and just like put me on the ground. It was kind of a funny interaction because, again, he's on the other end of the spectrum of size, and he's got a couple 100 pounds on me.
All right. What pitchers do you like to watch and why?
I like to watch, I think Kershaw is a guy that I like to watch. We've got a very similar, pitch repertoire as far as the fastball, cutter, and curveball go. He's a guy that I like to study a little bit, again, because I feel like we have the same stuff and we attack hitters the same way. He's a guy that I kind of go to the most as far as video and analytics and stuff like that.
I like it. Now, with that said, you're in camp with the Rockies this year. And I'm always curious, are there specific strategies for pitching at altitude? Because I know you've been to Colorado in the past. Is this going to be totally out of left field for you? Do you feel really confident about how it goes?
I feel pretty confident. I've always approached the altitude as a mindset, to be honest with you. Obviously it matters. Your ball's not going to do as much as it would, not at that altitude. But to me, it's more of a mindset, than anything. Your stuff is still going to be good. You just have to, set your sights differently.
I like it. All right, man. Well, it was awesome to have you on. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and we are excited to see you do your thing this year. It's been cool to be to not just witness your story, but be a part of it as well. So, best of luck.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.